I remained there, one foot on the polished marble step outside the Grand Varelli, as if I was still hesitating about crossing a threshold I had financed myself. The keycard in my hand felt slippery with perspiration, not from anxiety, no, that sensation had faded long ago, but from self-restraint. It took more exertion to stay silent than to shout aloud. 7 years of sketches and construction, sleepless nights and silent sacrifices. This lobby, these steps, the glimmer of gold along the windows, every square inch of this establishment bore my mark like a clandestine signature. Yet I wasn't welcome tonight. Not according to them. Pause. Pia's voice echoed through the night air, sharp as the sound of fake pearls striking glass. This place has a dress code, darling. Her hand pressed against my chest, just hard enough to be a slight provocation, but lightly enough to avoid escalation. She tilted her head, smirking beneath a cascade of borrowed blonde hair extensions. Janelle and Cora stood beside her, resembling glitzy gargoyles, chuckling in unison as their champagne diminished quickly, their air of superiority escalating faster than the effervescence in their glasses. I glanced down at myself, wearing a second-hand blazer, clean shirt, and loafers. Neither Armani nor Gucci, but not suggestive of anything unworthy either. My style has always been straightforward, utilitarian, prioritizing functionality over flair. However, in their eyes, my presence tonight wasn't merely underdressed. It was unwelcome. I didn't belong here. Before I could utter a syllable, Mariah emerged. Her heels clacked against the marble like punctuation marks, sharp and deliberate, signifying wealth. A split up her emerald green dress reached nearly to her hip, and her neckline dipped lower than our most recent conversation. She moved as if composed of oil and envy, gliding smoothly yet inflammable. For a brief instant, she didn't notice me. She was all smiles and gestures towards someone within, playing the role of the charming socialite, the polished spouse. Then her gaze fell upon me. The transition was subtle but deadly. Her lips, which had earlier curved in a delightful laugh, stiffened into a straight line. She approached, her voice barely audible yet sharp enough to shatter glass. She said, "Don't humiliate me." Those 3 words encompassed the entirety of our marriage in a hushed tone. I remained silent, unsure of what to say. Was I to reveal that I had accepted the client's invitation rather than hers, one she likely believed was now hers? Or admit my curiosity about how extensively her facade had expanded? She didn't expect a reply. Instead, she turned back to her group, assuming her message had been received. But I did not budge, neither backward nor forward. I stood right where I was, still clinging to the invitation card, letting the quietness linger. Janelle whispered something amusing into Pia's ear, likely about my blazer or the fact that I didn't retaliate. They considered me harmless, amusing, a misplaced joke. Anger should have surged, but instead, tranquility rose within me. I was aware of something they weren't. I knew the punchline, and the truth about punchlines, they pack a greater wallop when the audience thinks you're the joke. They were unaware that this sidewalk they safeguarded like fortress gates had once been a mud pit, and I had written the first check to initiate construction on this land before the name Varelli was even chosen. They didn't know I examined the initial 5 designs of the fountain behind them, or that I personally rejected the 6th because it appeared too cold. They didn't know about the hand-painted mural inside the lobby, which was based on a photograph I took in Naples during Mariah's last feigned enjoyable vacation. They were uninformed because I chose to keep it hidden from them. At times, silence isn't weakness, it's a calculated move. And this strategy had been 7 years in the making. This was Mariah's voice. Originally enticing enough to offer me a promise, it transformed into tools over time. Her affection was honed with comparisons and sarcasm, gauged by public acclaim. At first, I perceived it as ambition. However, upon reflection, I recognized it as her means of survival, not mine. She craved admiration, adoration, envy. Anything endangering that image needed to be concealed, diminished, or ridiculed. I wasn't her husband tonight. I was an unwelcome distraction in cheap clothing unfit for the lighting. Pia tapped her nails against her phone, asking, "Are you sure he's permitted here?" without even glancing at me. Mariah remained unfazed. "Not tonight," she answered. "Let's maintain our grace." This comment hurt not because I accepted it as truth, but because she believed in it herself. It was then that I smiled, not out of bitterness or sorrow, but with the tranquil contentment of a man who had committed the script to memory and knew precisely when the final act would unfold. I no longer required entrance, for I had already made my presence known. They hadn't caught up to the narrative yet, and when they did, it would be worth the 7 years of quiet. Mariah scanned over my blazer as if it had wronged her personally. The disdain in her expression was subtle but clear. Her lip curled slightly at the collar, suggesting she might inquire about its origins from a donation bin. With an air of someone stage whispering yet hoping everyone listens, she leaned in and said, "Your partners are my girlfriend's real ones." She moved back before I could reply, twirling on her crystal-embellished stilettos as if the insult were a rehearsed dance move. I chuckled nervously, gripping her metallic clutch tightly as if it held classified information. Janelle, poor thing, lacked grace. She leaned forward, scrutinizing my shoes. Are those loafers genuine leather, or part of the valet uniform? This comment elicited a laugh from Cora. Syrupy voices seem like hollow displays of concern for others' feelings, more like a game to them. I remained silent not because I lacked words, but because their words didn't warrant a response. The lobby past them resembled my mental image of the Grand Varelli when the concept was merely sketches on my tablet and late-night discussions with Milanese architects. The chandeliers imported from an old opera house in Florence sparkled above gleaming marbles so pure you could etch your regrets onto it. I vividly recalled the initial dimmer test on those lights, staying till 3 a.m., watching the gradual golden dim, and ensuring it mirrored the warmth I desired people to feel upon entering. Yet here I was, refused entry by women whose architectural feat was merely an Instagram filter concealing their untruths. What startled me wasn't the laughter. It was Maria's failure to intervene, even encouraging it instead. She didn't defend me. She didn't ease the situation with a glance, a caress, or an evasion. Instead, she allowed them to heap their criticisms on me, as if I needed them to perceive what I perceived, that I no longer aligned with her taste, that I was outdated. A design blueprint that no longer fitted the current model. They didn't grasp what not even Maria understood. I would never cease to create. The silence they perceived was actually the most potent sound in construction. It signified work had delved beneath the surface, grown stronger and deeper. True foundations did not make noise, but sustained the towers. I stood unmoving while their derision enveloped me like a foul fragrance. Each insult echoed again. Each glance was like a wound. Pia reached to pick an imaginary piece of lint from my sleeve, whispering, "You should have at least rented something. This isn't casual barbecue attire." Maria laughed boisterously, the kind of laughter that sought validation from an audience. Janelle flashed me a tight, sorry-looking smile and commented, "Don't take it personally, Dan. We're just having fun." Yet, it didn't improve the situation. The spectacle I found myself in was not amusement, but an unkindness disguised in designer attire. Instead of them, I gazed beyond, directly at the heart of the lobby. Lobby, my design. The arrangement of custom flowers on the reception desk matched the deep plum shade I had insisted upon 6 months prior, overruling the event planner's preference for pale orchids. I desired a grounded, regal, and intimate feel, which would attract people. And here stood a group oblivious to their role as intruders in a structure that had once been my blueprint. They assumed that the night's expenditures on wine, private tastings, valet, and luxury services belonged to the brand. However, they overlooked the fact that the brand was me. Every penny spent tonight would travel back through my hands like warmth along copper pipes. I was funding my empire while mocking it behind its back. A year ago, I intentionally vanished from sight. I sold my name off the financial trail, transferred assets into a trust, and maintained my Varelli stake undocumented. Not even Maria knew about this. She assumed that our separated finances following my departure from consulting signaled I had reached rock bottom. She hadn't delved deeper after the settlement. Her eagerness to portray herself as a wealthy divorcee prevented her from asking more questions. Allow her to believe it. Let everyone continue believing it. Pia's date exited then, a hedge fund manager whose handshake was dominated by his wrist rather than a firm grip. Naturally, he didn't recognize me. Only those who had fought alongside me before the towers were built would do so. He merely nodded indifferently and inquired if Pia possessed the tasting pass. She brandished it as though it were a mark of royalty, saying, "Tonight is reserved for the finest tables," she said, nudging Maria. "You managed to secure us the best seats, didn't you?" Maria responded with a forced smile. "I informed them I'd be arriving with several influential companions. That was the purpose for this evening. Not the food, not the atmosphere. It was about her displaying her social circle, gaining prestige by association, even if it meant undermining the man who built her foundation. Yet I remained there, because truth is often more amusing than fiction, because their oblivion to the situation made the discomfort worthwhile. They believed I was attempting entry, crashing a party beyond my means, seeking relevance. However, I wasn't trying to enter. Instead, I allowed them to stride into a scene I had created, arranged, and financed, unaware that the stage lights were already on and the cameras rolling. They scoffed at the valet position. Good. Soon they would discover who holds the payroll. And soon enough, my blazer wouldn't matter in the least. "You're not on the list," Cora said, lips firmly pursed, clutching the clipboard as if it were a symbol of honor. Her voice held an overly saccharine tone, as if she was masking her enjoyment of her authority. But I could see it in her eyes, a fleeting hint of pleasure at asserting herself toward someone she considered inferior. Her pen paused dramatically above the paper, as though she was questioning whether to allow me entry out of pity. "Perhaps you've mistaken the entrance," she suggested, feigning worry. Almost laughing, I reminded myself that I was the one who had prepared the entire list, not just the guest list, but also the vendor list, layout plans, investor itinerary, security protocols, and even selected the custom paper stock for the clipboard because I didn't like the texture of the original batch. And yet, here Cora was, acting as if she held the keys to a kingdom that I had built with my own hands and ideas. This wasn't merely a party. It was the Varelli's Crown Jewel event, an exclusive tasting for investors, celebrities, and high-net-worth individuals eager to be seen and catered to. That night aimed to showcase Varelli as the epitome of luxury, yet concealed was the fact that the man outside in a second-hand blazer held ownership over every wine bottle, hors d'oeuvre, and contract being negotiated. Mariah, standing nearby, watched me be turned away while smirking subtly, implying a premeditated scheme rather than confusion. This was not merely miscommunication, it was manipulation. She sought my denial, desired the spectacle of it in front of her companions, intended to humiliate me subtly and strategically behind veils of regulations and etiquette. It then dawned on me, this was not about keeping me out, it was about upholding appearances. Mariah did not want others to perceive my continuing power, influence, or ownership. Cora dismissed me because I opted for anonymity instead of being visible. To her, visibility is a measure of value, and since I lacked it, she considered me insignificant, easily forgotten. Yet I remained quiet, letting the silence linger, waiting for her to challenge me or present evidence to prove herself wrong. However, I did nothing, choosing instead to stand motionless, observing Mariah's growing discomfort beneath her pretentious facade. In reality, she was fearful of being overshadowed. Tonight, the shadow loomed larger and closer to her, inch by inch. From behind me, the valets called out names, jingling keys, the luxurious engines roaring as guests arrived. The marble floor still carried a whiff of polish, like the place had been stripped clean just in time for tonight's deceptions. An elegantly dark SUV arrived, revealing a well-known culinary artist whose surname had become synonymous with fame. He didn't acknowledge me. There was no need. In his eyes, I was just another spectator. Yet, the meal he would present soon was due to my team's arrangement. I had arranged for his travel on our private plane. Cora tussed disapprovingly and scribbled out a name. "Excuse me," I supplied softly. "Crosswell," she repeated, still searching the pages as if the name might magically appear with her prolonged scrutiny. There was no response. Mariah intervened then, taking a step forward, but not enough to seem implicated. "It's all right," she said soothingly to Cora. "It doesn't concern me. Peace. Nobody. Let's proceed." She addressed Pia and Janelle, who were admiring a silver-bearded businessman nearby. "We mustn't be late for our reservation. Nobody." This fleeting moment of dismissal pricked for a brief instant. Not because I felt it, but because it brought to mind her previous standing. The woman who once nestled beside me in a squeaky-floored apartment and murmured that grand estates and marble were unnecessary. All she required was faith, companionship. She declared, "We're going to create something people will discuss for generations." I trusted her. At the time, her aspiration seemed like affection. Now it appeared as the act it truly was, and I had left the stage before she preferred. A voice echoed in Cora's earbud, discussing a reprint of the guest list due to a printer malfunction. I smirked within myself because I had instructed Maxwell to replace the final guest roster at 6 p.m. with the updated version hidden inside the Rosewood Lounge. This meant Cora was standing there waving a document that was already obsolete. Worthless, ornamental, like her clipboard. Nevertheless, she attempted to uphold an air of significance, safeguarding her eyes from the overhead lights. "You'll need to move aside, sir. We can't delay the line." "I'm not hindering anything," I retorted. Mariah squinted, sensing an alteration. She wasn't fully aware of what it was, but the tone in my voice triggered her keen instincts. I witnessed the instant her conviction wavered. Barely noticeable, it manifested in her quick lick of her lower lip, as if she were attempting to restore her smile. Janelle exchanged glances between us, hinting at an unsettling sensation. I offered no response, merely a nod. My gaze then shifted toward the double doors that divided the lobby from the lounge, where the genuine guests socialized, where the evening would unfold. "You don't belong here," Mariah eventually murmured, her voice hushed, intended for my ears only. The venom was absent, replaced by a sense of despair. A final effort to uphold the narrative before the wind changed direction. I maintained eye contact with her and held it for a moment too prolonged, long enough to remind her of everything she had overlooked, what I had constructed, who I still am, and how little she comprehends now. Then I moved aside, not because she instructed me to, but to remind her of my dominance. She wanted her to sense the void before the reality struck her hard, like a door being unlocked behind her. I was the base they all stood upon. Soon enough, they would recall clearly who they were mocking. Pia was talking in mid-sentence, her voice nasal and loud over the lobby music, pointing towards a tall man in a fitted cobalt suit. "That's my fiancé, Everett. He recently completed a Series B round with 3 major funds in Zurich, and he actually pays attention when I speak. Unlike some people." She didn't look at me as she said it. Her tone did the job of pointing. Janelle was her plus one, a nervous man in a velvet jacket and shiny patent leather shoes that shouted new wealth, following closely behind. "This is Dax," she announced with pride. "He deals with crypto or trades it. Frankly, I'm not sure. But he made 70,000 while we waited in line last week." Dax glanced at me with a nod before focusing on his phone, seemingly captivated by blockchain diagrams rather than our conversation. That's when Mariah appeared, standing beside them as if she were the star of a brightly lit stage play, her smile perfect, her demeanor impeccable, her tone oozing casual superiority. "Let's not feign ignorance about this being your turf," she said to me, ensuring her friends could hear, yet keeping it from sounding too harsh. That was Mariah's skill, delivering hurt like a compliment, each insult wrapped in silk. I considered retorting, reminding her that every inch of this lobby had been measured by my hand, that the scent filling the air, bergamot and cedarwood, was my selection after Mariah requested power with subtlety, that the soundproof panels in the tasting room were custom-made following a demonstration with a violinist who played various notes until I approved, ensuring the room wouldn't resonate too sharply. But I remained silent. Instead, I met her gaze, thoroughly observed her. Her eyelashes flickered as if anticipating me to retreat. Yet, I didn't budge. Instead, I slightly tilted my head and monitored the self-satisfaction unravel at the corners. For I recalled her prior to all this, before the cocktail gowns and carefully planned photo shoots. when her notion of luxury was gas station wine and a weekend rest, when we'd laugh in the quiet of a faulty heater, our vapor clouding the air due to lack of repairs. She wasn't always like this, or perhaps I simply failed to recognize it. There was a moment she'd perch cross-legged in our living room, scattered magazine clippings surrounding her as if feathers. She'd express dreams aloud, tracing fingers over glossy pages, muttering aspirations such as, "Someday, I want a fireplace viewable from the bathtub," or "Suppose we had a hotel where people felt wealthier merely breathing the air." I'd feign ignorance, meanwhile plotting floor plans in my mind. She claimed indifference towards my rise to fame, instead declaring we'd achieve it together, regardless of others' beliefs. However, something shifted perhaps within me or around us. When I deliberately withdrew from the public limelight and tactically pursued progress, she perceived it as defeat. As I ceased seeking acclaim and focused on constructing foundations surreptitiously, she saw it as retreat. She neither inquired nor observed my extended working hours, stealthy travel, or covert meetings. What caught her attention was the void of headlines, the scarcity of Instagram shout-outs, the silence. Mariah didn't wed me for social status, at least not initially. Yet, once she experienced it, she never looked back. Now, she played hostess to the world I crafted, acting as if I were an ex-employee reminiscing about the past days. If only she knew where I resided now, not the condo she thought I leased, but the hidden dwelling I used as a disguise for my mailing address. Indeed, my true abode lay hidden, 23 stories above us, the penthouse atop the Grand Versailles, surreptitiously built and furnished in secretive silence. When I acquired the highest floor of this building, I masked the deed within a private LLC, nestled behind numerous shell companies so intricate that not even Mariah, with her compulsive habit to trace everyone's position, could decipher it. I moved in 6 months ago, discreetly completing renovations first. The view from my window was of the skyline she boasted to her friends, a skyline I contributed to shaping financially. And every evening, I savored whiskey beneath custom-crafted ceiling beams that she once claimed would make a home feel secure. While she reveled in her new circle, repeating phrases like, "He's unsuited for this lifestyle," I knew the true gist. The lifestyle she flaunted, it was my investment. The air of exclusivity she cherished like a fragrance, it belonged to me. She didn't wed a man. She married a stage. Upon lifting the drapes, she departed, believing the following act to be hers, but unbeknownst to her and others, the scenario had always been mine. I observed her now, chuckling over an inside joke with Pia, her hand resting on Dax's shoulder as if seeking confirmation of proximity to significance. She appeared content, not genuinely happy, the sort of happiness one assumes for a public display, the kind practiced in front of a mirror before entering a crowded lobby where people know more about your shoes than your soul. And yet, I did not harbor animosity. No longer. I merely felt detachment. Like observing a stunning residence you once constructed being redesigned according to someone else's flashy, cluttered tastes, making it unrecognizable. A dwelling that legally belongs to you, but no longer serves as your home. I inhaled deeply and looked upwards, beyond the lobby, beyond the crowd, toward the glass that mirrored the city's radiance. The penthouse encompassed all she once desired: tranquility, the vista, the sanctuary. However, it concealed something else as well. Her and me, the man she believed was left behind. Contrary to appearances, she hadn't parted from me. Instead, she had married someone else. Prestige was at stake tonight, and she was on the verge of discovering the exact price she would pay for it. The Grand Versailles doors whispered open with a quiet hiss, a sound reminiscent of a hidden truth unveiled. Next emerged Maxwell. His black suit was as sharp as a scalpel, his polished shoes so immaculate they could have served as mirrors for the chandeliers above. He moved with an air of certainty, a man who didn't question his identity, one he had always known. Long before the Verley came into existence, Maxwell was by my side initially as a contracted consultant on a Lisbon development, later as my full-time security chief, confidant, and the only individual aware of my stealthy resurgence tonight. He recognized me instantly, even amidst the swirling crowd, even in the throng of costly haircuts and designer attire. His radio softly beeped on his shoulder, but he paid it no mind, fully focused on the important transmission. He strode purposefully across the lobby, clearing a path like silk through the air. All eyes turned towards him, not just due to his air of command, but because his calm demeanor contrasted starkly with the turmoil most were trying to manage. He looked anticipatory. "Mr. Crosswell," he greeted, nodding once, briefly, like a king confirming an event. Not loudly, not dramatically, yet everyone within earshot heard him. The name echoed like breaking glass underfoot. He moved to my side, then subtly behind, acting as a well-trained shadow. "We've been searching for you," he continued, his tone calm and professionally detached. "Your room is ready. Chef Landon has been informed and stands ready to start your private tasting. The investor group is assembled. Should I inform them of your arrival?" I nodded slowly in response. My eyes remained fixed on Mariah. The name Crosswell seemed to strike her as forcefully as a slap. A slight, brief change in her posture and an almost imperceptible twitch near her eyes suggested she was trying to hide it with a quick blink. Her facade crumbled. She gasped, opening her mouth to speak, but no words escaped. Pia's jaw dropped so far that a tax invoice could have slid beneath it. Janelle blinked rapidly 3 times. Cora, gripping her clipboard tightly as if for dear life, stepped back involuntarily and glanced at the guest list, hoping for some miraculous revision. Dax paused mid-action, his phone halfway to his ear, uncertain whether he should be capturing the moment or fleeing. But Mariah, she stood unmoving, her gaze locked on me as if I was a ghost. To her, I had been socially, professionally, and publicly deceased. She had buried me under her tale of failure. She told her friends I'd vanished when times got tough. Allow them to assume I was simply a man struggling to match her ascent. She never revealed that I was the one signing the checks, owning the bricks beneath their heels, providing the Veuve instead of sparkling cider, and being the foundation of her success. The silence that had once shrouded my role was now given a face, a name: Maxwell. He stood resolute, maintaining his professional demeanor, casting furtive glances at the surprised gathering with quiet assessment. No smirk graced his lips, no need for it. His voice was as hard as steel enveloped in velvet. "If you wish, your vehicle can be brought to the west entrance, Mr. Crosswell. It's less crowded and more private." It was the lethal punchline. The message was clear. This wasn't merely my hotel, this was my realm. And if I decided to vanish, I could. If I chose to enter, I would. If I wanted someone removed from my presence, Maxwell would execute the task with the same finesse he had just displayed in securing a room of whispers. I gradually turned my gaze towards Mariah, finding her diminished in stature. Her shimmering dress couldn't conceal the panic that was creeping into her features. Her companions, once brimming with laughter, now seemed bewildered and unsure. It wasn't merely embarrassment she felt. She had been exposed, and I hadn't uttered a single raised voice. I subtly signaled to Maxwell with a small nod. "There's no need," I said. "Let them witness." The words were meant for her, not him. Let them observe. Let them catch a glimpse of the man they dismissed at the doorstep, making his way through the doors they believed they mastered. Let them experience the burden of every slight, every jest, every quiet ridicule. Let them recall that power doesn't always make itself known with commotion. Sometimes it waits, and when it arrives, it doesn't debate, it doesn't plead. It simply opens the door and enters. Maxwell gestured casually, a familiar motion for someone who had performed this action numerous times before. "After you," he said politely. I took a single step forward. Cora shuddered, Janelle breathed quietly, Pia seemed to hope this wasn't real, and Mariah stood still. I walked past them, maintaining my pace. The doors opened silently for me, exposing the lavish interior and lounge they believed was theirs. In the glass, I saw myself, the same jacket, shoes, and untroubled face. Yet, the burden felt different. The room sensed it. The atmosphere altered. Every employee who glanced my way acknowledged me with a subconscious show of deference from knowing my position. Mariah murmured "Daniel" faintly behind me, almost inaudible. I continued walking, Maxwell following close by, already making a call in hushed tones, executing the silent dance of fulfilling an obligation. Approaching the hallway heading towards private rooms, I cast a glance, merely enough to observe Mariah and her sparkling entourage lingering in the entranceway like dolls out of sync with the seasons. The joke had been made, unspoken by me. Or perhaps the truth. The reality spoke for itself, reverberating off the marble. I took my time, that was crucial. I strolled at a leisurely pace, as if this place belonged to me because it did. The silence that followed Maxwell's declaration was heavy, almost sacred. Even the pianist in the corner momentarily missed a beat before regaining composure, his fingers pausing on the keys as if the shift in ambience had chilled the atmosphere between the rooms. The once mocking lobby now softened, subtly bowing, altering its tone like a crowd yielding to royalty's arrival without notice. Maxwell held the door open as if ushering a king into his own domain. I didn't turn fully, but gave myself a glance over my shoulder, meeting their bewildered expressions. "Ladies," I said, maintaining an unfeigned composure, "have a pleasant evening. Try not to disgrace yourselves." Pia's lips moved, yet no words were uttered. Janelle automatically smoothed the front of her gown as if correcting something beyond fabric. Cora tightly held her clipboard as if it could shield her from sinking. And Maria remained stationary, heels pressed into the marble floor, her hand hanging at her side like it had forgotten its purpose to grasp pride. I advanced into the main foyer, and all that I had strived for began to gleam simultaneously. "Mr. Crosswell," the concierge greeted with a tentative smile, glancing rapidly at those following me, "welcome home." She discreetly pressed a button under the desk. The elevator signaled almost immediately. Marcus, a quick-witted bellhop who had committed the wine list to memory, stood rigidly, clutching the tasting menu. He was already turning towards the lounge where Chef Landon was arranging the preselected dishes for the evening's investors. The pianist readjusted, shifting to a more soothing tempo. A hint of jazz permeated the atmosphere, as if someone had dampened the cacophony and enhanced the stage lights. The waitstaff began to whisper among themselves, their murmurs barely audible but distinct enough. A ripple of reaction moved from one server to another, nods, hushed conversations, furtive glances over their shoulders. They had witnessed the interaction at the entrance. Before dessert forks were placed, the hotel gossip would spread the news. Maria arrived, 2 minutes late. The sound of her heels was no longer self-assured, it was hurried, irregular. A click here, a tap there. She joined me just as Maxwell inputted the code to unlock access to the executive floor. "Daniel," she breathed softly, "is this some sort of jest?" This time, I turned fully towards her and allowed her to read the truth in my gaze before speaking. "No, love," I replied softly. "The Grand Varelli is mine, always has been." She blinked twice, as if attempting to erase the tangible reality before her with the sweep of her eyelashes. "That can't be. You never. You mentioned working on something minor." "I said I was creating." "I never specified what," I retorted. Her mouth opened and closed like a struggling fish, her mind struggling to keep pace, much like a faulty GPS recalculating a route through unbelief. She looked around the lobby, now noticing how every staff member's demeanor altered in my presence, how the bartender offered a slight bow as I passed, how patrons were being guided discreetly to make way for me, not out of fear, but admiration. She was no longer walking alongside a guest. She trailed the proprietor. I entered the Rosewood Lounge, finding the city's elite already congregated bankers, tech investors, diplomats, media executives. Soft laughter reverberated from the walls, intermingling with crystal glasses clinking against polished wood. Everything was carefully arranged, even the subtle jasmine scent that replaced the main lobby's cedar aroma, a scent I had personally chosen after a disagreement about its earthiness with Landon. I persisted in my choice. No one hesitated, no confusion, just handshakes and warmth. Martin Hawk of Hawk Ventures stood up to welcome me with a grin, saying, "Crosswell, so you're the secret investor." Others followed suit, praising my strategy as genius. Rumors were confirmed. Mariah, standing behind me, remained stiff as a mannequin. I chose not to introduce her then, not out of spite, but because she was simply another guest now, an outsider in the place she believed she owned by association. Janelle and Pia hesitated at the lounge entrance, unsure if they should enter or depart. Cora remained stationary in the hallway, her clipboard limp by her side. I noticed Mariah looking at them, seeking assistance. None was forthcoming. Chef Land emerged with a tray, offering an artfully arranged stack of crab profiteroles infused with saffron and a touch of chili oil. He smiled at me. "Ready to begin," I replied. "Let's." I settled at the head of the private table, a place Mariah may have yearned to be near only recently. She persisted standing. For an extended 15 seconds, she wavered, uncertain if she was even welcomed anymore. She wasn't. The maitre d' politely cleared his throat. "May I find you a seat, madam?" Mariah looked at me, her eyes seeking any trace of familiarity. I provided none. I sipped the champagne in my glass and faced the room once more. Business resumed. Names were exchanged. Business thrived much like the premium wine I had brought from a vineyard I helped finance 5 years prior. Mariah departed silently, without a word. Similar to my own past disappearance, only this time, her exit went unnoticed by everyone except me and the reality. The truth had finally manifested itself. I ventured further into the Rosewood Lounge, each step muffled by the hushed attentiveness. It was ironic. The individuals assembled in that room, once querying for superior connections when I pitched them 5 years ago, were now standing upon my arrival. Not from politeness, but from calculation. For power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in silence until the environment tilts its balance. Martin Hawk was the first to yield. Known for his firm handshake and inflated ego, he flashed a smile of respect tonight. "Crosswell," he declared, his voice interrupting the gentle piano melody. "You, the secret proprietor, truly inventive, I must say." He slapped me on the back as if we were long-lost comrades from a past war, though our last encounter saw him questioning my adaptability in the market. Now, his expression bore that of a fan granted backstage access. Hiding your identity in documentation and owning the entire structure through intricate layers? That's masterful. That's how you play the long game. I returned his smile, not out of arrogance, but to verify. Yes, it was indeed me. The one they talked about in hushed tones. The one they thought had vanished. I didn't disappear. I multiplied. Quietly, strategically. And now, the fruits of my labor were ripe. More figures rose, one after another: a Harrison Ling, Nadia Patel, Donovan Price. These weren't casual acquaintances. They were titans who could sway entire sectors. Each extended their hand. Some were already aware of the secret. Others learned it in this moment. But all responded with the same sentiment of respect. The kind that can't be purchased. Merely gained recognition, but for me it was earned, then disrespected, and eventually reclaimed with interest. In this instance, Mariah remained immobile. She had stealthily joined me in the lounge, resembling a spectral presence lingering near the man she once knew intimately. However, she wasn't situated at the table. Instead, she stood to one side, by the bar, feigning nonchalance. Her companions were nowhere to be found. Mariah had vanished after the pianist altered keys, while Janelle was uneasily conversing with someone near the cloakroom, as if remembering another event happening elsewhere. Mariah attempted a smile when someone caught her eye, but it quickly fractured under the burden of realizing she no longer occupied the limelight. She was no longer the focal point. She was barely even a footnote. Her dress, the shimmery green number she wore as armor, now felt like a desperate attempt. Too flashy, too forced. Her once regal posture faltered with each indifference shown to her. I didn't need to belittle her. The truth had already assumed that role. In perfect form, she tried to join a discussion. From afar, I observed her approach two investors with a feigned sugary tone. "Aren't the surroundings magnificent?" she said, subtly referring to my ex who used to work in design. However, they paid no heed. Their gaze was fixed on me. Not her, me. And for the first time in a while, Mariah recognized her need to be the focus. A waiter offered me a glass of red from my exclusive collection, never before listed on the hotel's public wine list. I savored a sip, It was refined, matured, and silent, yet intricate, much like the unexpected revenge Mariah hadn't foreseen. "Is that your ex-wife?" Nadia asked softly, stealing a glance at Mariah as she sat down next to me. Her voice was inquisitive rather than condemning. I recalled reading about her on the internet some time ago. She was dating the tech entrepreneur with the conspicuous teeth, wasn't she? I subtly confirmed with a nod. She seems to enjoy being in the limelight. Now, Nadia inquired, her eyebrows rising subtly. She recognized herself, I replied serenely. The hushed whispers and murmurs started. I could sense them sneaking through the room like growing warmth. "That's the man she mockingly laughed at in the lobby. You mean he owns this? I thought he was penniless. She treated him like help. Apparently, he was just letting her talk. I didn't need to utter a word. The room would relay the story for me. By the time dessert was served, the image of the woman who ridiculed the owner outside his own building would be seared into their minds. Mariah's eyes met mine fleetingly, and in that instant, everything crumbled. Her conviction, her bearing, the persona she had cultivated over the past year. It all trembled and disintegrated under the revelation that the man she once deemed an impediment had constructed the very path she now faltered on. She instinctively touched the necklace she usually wore to appear costly. Approaching a lifeline while already submerged, another figure arrived, a city planner. "We've collaborated on a new district project." We discussed figures, deadlines, prospective allies. I responded effortlessly, concentrated, unaffected. Beyond him, Janelle momentarily reappeared, exchanged words with Mariah before disappearing once more. Evading discomfort, likely fearing misidentification as part of the losing faction. It had become teams, not romantic pairs or casual friends, and Mariah had chosen incorrectly. Her presence was dwindling, not through physical shrinkage, but due to social withdrawal. Her worth had long been connected to her association with power, but now that power had shifted, she lacked support. No fresh partner at her side, no secret agreement in her ear, no plan B, just Mariah and thee. She'd once suggested this setting wasn't for me. Yet tonight, it was Mariah who seemed out of sync, not due to a room transformation, but because she had never grasped the architects behind its creation. I observed her advance towards the exit, her steps deliberate and minuscule. Her gaze flickered left and right, as if anticipating a halt from someone. However, neither Pia nor Janelle, nor even the staff, who used to welcome her with feigned warmth, intervened. She got to the door, halted momentarily, hand on the jamb, casting one last glance back. I remained unmoving, and that fleeting instant, that lingering second before she vanished, was the genuine culmination of the night's festivities, not the wine or the menu, but the quietude, the kind that conveys everything. The room seemed to grow softer, or perhaps it was I who softened. The sound of cutlery tapping on porcelain transformed into a rhythmic melody. Surrounding me, voices harmonized in deep undertones, old companions renewing bonds, new partnerships emerging, money flitting about like dance movements on napkins folded into triangles. Yet I stayed put, drink in hand, watching as the remnants of Mariah's presence slipped away behind the lounge doors. She did not return neither to her table nor to the moment. She left the stage she once felt was hers, without applause, without a bow. In the absence of any trace of the woman she had struggled so much to be, I reclined in a grand, deep navy velvet chair adorned with antique brass studs, and allowed the moment to linger. Opposite me, Martin Hawk was discussing international expansion, using delicate hand gestures over an expensive lamb carpaccio. I merely nodded, though my gaze strayed towards where Mariah had once stood. Just a short while ago, she would have filled that space with every ounce of power and charm she possessed. However, tonight, the attention had shifted, not with pompous noise, with solemn weight. I lifted my glass and rose to my feet. The chatter around me subsided like well-behaved children at a family gathering. Chairs shuffled. Conversations paused. Even Landon, in the midst of arranging the next course, set down his spoon and looked up. I hadn't intended to speak, but the atmosphere seemed to anticipate it, as if the silence itself was waiting for my words. "Thank you all," I started, letting the words flow without theatricality. "Tonight, No microphone or cue was needed. Only the presence of everyone gathered here mattered. Your faith in Grand Varelli and our joint vision is what truly matters. This venue has never been about marble, chandeliers, or imported glassware. I took a moment, my fingers lightly gripping the stem of my wine glass. Instead, it's been about carving out space for those who recognize the distinction between noise and worth. Some of you nodded in agreement. Others leaned forward as if anticipating what was to come, even though they already knew where this conversation would lead. I spent a considerable amount of time operating from behind the scenes, allowing my words to stay consistent. Many misunderstood silence for absence and interpreted humility as a sign of defeat. But perspective, I emphasized, raising the glass slightly, is an investment that continually increases in value. A few subtle, appreciative chuckles echoed. No laughter filled the room. Instead, a sense of understanding pervaded. Mariah's name didn't need to be mentioned. Her presence was felt throughout the gathering. At that table, everyone had witnessed the scene in the lobby, felt the palpable change when Maxwell called out my name, observed the mask slipping off her face and splintering on the spot. While some may have admired her elegance before, now they saw through it to the truth. That borrowed elegance without gratitude is just pompous vanity. I subtly tilted my glass towards the chef's station, where Landon was feigning indifference. To those who labor in silence, I said, to the spaces we create when no one is looking, and to the people who teach us that rejection can be the most sincere invitation to grow. We drank, slowly, ponderously. As I set down my glass, I noticed a familiar figure making his way toward our table. Alan Prescott, a silver-haired real estate mogul whose name alone could alter banking decisions. But he wasn't coming to me with figures. He was extending an envelope, thick and cream-colored, sealed in deep red wax. He subtly placed an envelope next to your plate, calling it from your father-in-law. I arched an eyebrow. Alan faintly smiled, indicating he still regarded you as son-in-law. He noted that you were the only man who completed a project as promised. I cautiously opened the envelope to reveal the title deed for a countryside estate they had long been considering. Mariah had casually mentioned it, hopeful they'd secure it after her father's fourth unsuccessful application. She referred to it as a reset space. I acquired it a week later. Inside was a solitary note, neatly written, for the man who doesn't seek praise to be certain of his success. Thank you. I returned the note and reinserted it. This wasn't revenge, it was understanding. Her father, typically stoic, calculating, rarely affectionate, had always perceived through the chaos, even if he never verbally acknowledged it. Perhaps he merely understood what his daughter had discarded. Regardless, the point was conveyed. Across the table, Nadia Patel lifted her glass once more. Indeed, Daniel, that was eloquently put. You've mastered something many struggle with for decades, winning without boasting. I acknowledged with a nod. Sometimes one wins by giving the impression of losing. The dishes were cleared, and dessert arrived, a dark chocolate souffle with aged port and sea salt. Landon winked as he passed me, as if he was proud of more than just the meal. Among us, the atmosphere transitioned from reverence to camaraderie. My guests felt at ease now. They knew where the authority lay. They no longer had to speculate. The evening's burden no longer weighed on me. Mariah had always believed I sought status, attention, or validation. What she failed to grasp was that I abandoned such pursuit the day I realized I could create things that could not be taken away. The man can be divorced, but his creations remain undone. That was the essence of this hotel, a monument to quiet endurance. And tonight, amidst a hall filled with carefully selected elegance and high-end guests, the reality loomed larger than the chandeliers. As the laughter echoed and drinks were replenished, I once more found myself leaning back, my fingers gently caressing the envelope beside my wine, not as a trophy, but as a symbol. Not all victories are accompanied by applause. Some merely arrive in hushed silence. You find yourself again when the noise subsides. The aftermath didn't postpone itself until dawn. It started while the souffle was still warm. Maxwell joined me at the private elevator shortly after midnight, his voice soft and controlled. Yet I could sense beneath that veneer of calmness something was afoot. He said there had been activity, calls, messages, people trying to unravel the night's events in reverse. For now, I chose not to probe for details immediately. Instead, I accompanied him into the elevator as the doors slid shut behind us. In the polished surfaces, a man appeared who was barely familiar, not due to any change in appearance, but because the burden that had weighed heavily on his shoulders was absent, replaced by a sharper, lighter sense of clarity. The lighting had been adjusted for nighttime service, with a fireplace crackling, fresh fruit laid out, and espresso ready. My assistant had departed, and I'd ordered the staff to stay off the floor unless called upon. Maxwell offered me his tablet and started recapping. Pia's fiancé, he said, had withdrawn funds from her boutique cooperative without warning. He claimed she was an unskilled amateur who couldn't read the room. A photograph appeared on the screen depicting Pia exiting the Varelli with smudged makeup. She seemed resilient. She was no longer with Everett, as evidenced by the photo neither in it, nor in the car, nor part of the narrative. I simply nodded, expressing only understanding. It was a matter of cause and effect. The missing link in Janelle's crypto dealings was next on Maxwell's list. He'd vanished at Valet. Janelle had waited 35 minutes, but he didn't return. He didn't respond to a text message. He gave a subtle shrug. Some guests heard her say she didn't know his name. Seems authentic, I replied. Cora has been taken off the planning committee for the autumn gala, Maxwell continued, now in a nearly clinical tone. It appears that one of the senior partners witnessed how she treated you at the entrance. They disapproved of a member of the committee publicly mocking the owner. Optics. It's always about the optics, I whispered, placing the tablet aside and heading towards the window. Below me lay the city, shimmering with glass skyscrapers, ceaseless motion, luxury, and loneliness intermingling through midnight as if old lovers feigning novelty. I placed my hand on the cold glass and sighed. "What about Mariah?" I inquired, already aware he would mention her later. "She called twice," he answered. "The first time it was a blocked number. I rejected the call. The second time, she left a voicemail. She didn't say much, just requested a meeting, said it was crucial." Slowly, I turned from the window. Again, she called, this time reaching the hotel line. I responded, raising an eyebrow as he persisted with his accusations. He claimed we orchestrated her humiliation, insisting it was us who had set her up. He folded his hands behind his back, and then she begged, not asking, not pleading, but begging. The word hung heavy in the air. We both felt its weight. I moved towards the bar, poured a small glass of straight bourbon, and stared at the amber liquid before taking a sip. "She's not accustomed to losing," Maxwell noted. What always surprised people was that she didn't expect to lose to silence. They anticipated conflict, shouting, lawsuits, or ultimatums, but they were never ready for the ground giving way beneath them. For no one shouting, no fighting, just quiet, just gravity, just consequences. She accused me of humiliating her, but I murmured a denial. He corrected, "You didn't humiliate her. She humiliated herself." "You forgot to turn off the lights." I nodded subtly while taking a sip. Maxwell, more than others, comprehended the intricacy of this situation. Thus, he was the sole individual privy to the entire scheme, because he could balance justice with showmanship, because he never confused ego with tactics. "She had noticed you." I confirmed. I didn't require a meeting. I didn't seek an apology. What I required had already transpired. Mariah stood amidst a crowd, facing her mirror for the first time. Not the persona she crafted on social media, not the one adorned in luxury or groomed for gallery openings, but the authentic one, the one who exchanged affection for popularity, connection for proximity, and never fathomed the toll would ensnare her. And tonight, the price was paid. She lost her following, and without one, Mariah didn't know how to entertain. Maxwell coughed politely. "One more matter." I turned. She reappeared after the lounge emptied, slipped into the lobby, asked for elevator access. "She mentioned something left in your room." I raised an eyebrow, as she's never been inside before. "Precisely," he smiled slightly. She repeated it thrice, as if conviction could make it true. I remained silent, moving towards the window with drink in hand, heartbeat unwavering. She wasn't retrieving anything. She was attempting to rejoin the narrative. However, her chapter had already concluded within the story. She won't reach out again, I stated. Maxwell concurred, but she'll recall. That was the actual ending, wasn't it? Not a dramatic departure or forceful closure. Merely the persistent echo of being remembered, not affectionately, but distinctly. Like a lesson, like a caution, like a scar that no longer pains yet still tingles in the cold. I drained my drink and walked away from the window. Any other business? I inquired. Maxwell shook his head. His silence echoed louder than her arrogance could handle. I gave him a dismissive nod, and he departed, returning to the elevator with the composure of a man accustomed to vanishing. The doors sealed shut after him, leaving me solitary once more. Not lonely, merely alone, surrounded by my structure, my title, my quietude. I settled into the identical chair where I had initially sketched the Varelli blueprint when I scarcely owned the software license. I opened my journal and scribbled a simple phrase on an untouched page. Often, you don't need to destroy a bridge. You merely cease transporting people over it. The envelope was devoid of any gloss, adorned only with a raised emblem. No message, no initials, just the anticipation of resolution. My attorney handed it to me at 7:32 am, as precisely requested. He didn't knock. Instead, he slipped it under the door of the penthouse, like the final mark on a ledger that had already been settled. I quietly placed it on the kitchen counter next to an untouched bowl of cold figs. Inside was everything Mariah required for the divorce proceedings. The documents were neatly arranged, devoid of drama or preamble. Simple legal jargon filled its pages, clear and concise. She would find the clause where I renounced any connection of her name from the Varelli family, as well as the section detailing the monetary transfer. This was a silent termination, not a gesture of goodwill. My name was absent from the envelope, yet it was unnecessary. The paperwork spoke for itself, silently. There was no final conversation or meeting. Only an end. I ambled through the penthouse with bare feet. The floor felt cold from the morning's air circulating via concealed vents. Sunlight flooded in through full-height windows, shimmering on the marble like spilled champagne. I paused by the window overlooking the expansive courtyard, where a few early visitors strolled in robes, coffees in hand. Unaware that the structure itself was bidding a long overdue farewell, the Grand Varelli housed memories of every word spoken by Maria in the hallway, of Pia's subtle snubs, Cora's nervous stutters, and more. The building echoed with these reminiscences as the marble steps, oak banisters, and custom glass panes held memories that persisted even after people were gone. I dressed without hesitation in black pants, a crisp white shirt, and self-ironed tie, a solitary ritual that soothed me. Laya was already in the hallway with her tablet, eyes gleaming, stance erect. She mirrored my past self, when all I possessed were blueprints, debt, and an idea that others dismissed until it materialized with evidence. "Good morning," she greeted, walking alongside me towards the elevator as we proceeded. "Today, your schedule is compact yet structured. An early review at 11, followed by a check-in with the Urban Commission at 2. The lawyers verified that all documents have been served. From this moment on, you are free from obligations." "Free?" I repeated, calling for the elevator. The word resonated as crisp. Neither joyous nor melancholic, simply a factual assertion. A liberation from an agreement that no longer held romantic significance and instead had become a gradual stifling of esteem. She hesitated once more. Was it difficult? "No," I replied succinctly. It was merely long past due. The elevator door closed, and we descended in silence. Upon reaching the lobby, staff members acknowledged me as I passed. Some subtly, others openly now. The secret was exposed. I was no longer the enigmatic inhabitant of the penthouse. I was the name waiting to be revealed, and they would never taunt me again. Not out of fear, but because they finally recognized me. In the lobby, I halted. At the concierge desk, a small parcel awaited me, no return address. Without fanfare, I unveiled it. Inside lay a photograph, capturing us 3 years past, posed before the incomplete Varelli structure. Behind us, iron girders stood tall. Our hard hats were askew. Mariah's arm was linked with mine, her grin broad and brimming with ambition. On its reverse, in faded script, she had penned, "We'll construct eternally, even if no one applauds." I left the picture untouched on the desk. Perhaps she had forgotten her promise, or perhaps it was never sincere. Regardless, eternity was over. Laya drew nearer. "Shall I toss this away?" she queried. "No," I replied. "Leave it be. This edifice holds memories. It merits to harbor all of it." We traversed the main foyer, past the Rosewood Lounge, where fresh diners were being seated for brunch. Maxwell loitered near the entrance, arms folded, offering a quiet nod as we passed. He spoke not a word. His silence was eloquent enough. I halted at the entrance. The very doors that once barred my way now parted without struggle. The morning breeze tenderly touched my face as if greeting an old acquaintance. Beyond, traffic murmurs and horns echoed, yet tranquility filled me within. A deep breath in, a glance back at the window, and a gaze upward revealed a familiar structure that withstood all I'd offered it, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. This wasn't merely a hotel. It embodied my experiences, serving as tangible evidence of my personal growth beyond another's shadow. A small, gold-plated key, etched with the number 2301, denoted the penthouse. I handed it to Leia, who queried, "Are you promoting me?" "You've been managing the floor unofficially," I explained. "Now it's official, starting today." A hint of confusion flickered in her eyes, but was soon replaced by gratitude softened by caution. "Thank you," she said. "Not yet," I cautioned. "This location will challenge you." She smiled, her words echoing the impact they had. Indeed it did. I allowed the glass doors to seal after me, not with finality, but with a harmonious cadence. A rhythm birthed from rewriting a tale according to my own narrative. Today, Mariah would receive the documents. She'd read them privately, perhaps in the false penthouse she'd been feigning as hers. Perhaps she'd weep. Perhaps she'd call again. Perhaps she'd preserve the envelope, convincing herself she endured a tragic event. Yet I didn't abandon her. Instead, I reclaimed my own self. Now, I could stride into any space, any future, without needing an explanation. Because the solitary tale that truly mattered was the one constructed in silence, etched in steel and marble, and secured by a structure that never forgot the one who laid its foundation stone.